Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Dragon's Waterfall, your channel about Knights of the Zodiac, aka Saint Seiya. Now, it's that time of the year again, it's almost Christmas, and wherever you are in the world you're probably about to celebrate. So it's the right time to talk about quite an interesting topic, I think, which is the deities in Saint Seiya, on which there are very, very many. Now, this video is only part 1 of, I don't know how many, I suppose at least 4 or 5. And here we are going to talk about where the deities come from and who the main deities of the original series are. Then, in a future video, we'll discuss the various deities from the various spin-offs, and one by one. But first, before we begin, let's remind ourselves to hit that subscribe button and join the channel. It would be a nice Christmas present, I mean, can you think of anything nicer? And it would make you always informed and up to date with the world of Knights of the Zodiac. So hey, why not? And keep in mind, the Knights of the Zodiac world is always evolving and there's always more stuff coming out. So hit that subscribe button. First and foremost, let's dig into what makes a deity, and this is an apparently easy to answer question, which in truth is anything but. You see, there are 2 versions of the origin of the gods in Saint Seiya. The first and the oldest comes from the hypermyth, and the hypermyth, I suppose you could consider it a lore book. It was written by Masami Kurumada himself, the author of the original manga, and it was published in 1988 in the art book Saint Seiya Cosmo Special, so it's over 30 years old. And the hypermyth is not very long, it's only a couple of pages, but according to it, deities, gods, are in fact humans who have awoken the highest possible level of their cosmos, the 9th sense. Now, if you are a Netflix watcher only, you may not be familiar with the concept of senses. But let's just say that there are levels of consciousness that a knight can awaken, burning and erasing their cosmos more and more. Now, regular human beings have sight, smell, touch, taste and hearing. These are the regular 5 senses that all of us have. Then there is the 6th sense, which is a term used to describe intuition or sometimes premonition. Knights then can access the 7th sense, and the 7th sense is the cosmos at its purest level, and only the most powerful signs can access the 7th sense, and this is what makes them able to accomplish such incredible feats. Then there is an 8th sense, which is called Araya Shiki, and this is a special power allowing one to remain alive in the other world, so it will be quite useful when fighting against Hades later on in the series. And then finally there is the 9th sense, and the 9th sense allows one to transcend humanity and reach godhood, becoming by all effects and purposes a deity. According to the hypermyth, anyone has the power to awaken their 9th sense, but over the millennia this potential has become more and more diluted, to the point that no one has reached that level again since Buddha. The original Buddha apparently was the last person in history who awoken to his 9th sense and transcended humanity. Zeus, Poseidon and Hades were indeed the first humans to awaken the 9th sense, and so they became gods according to the hypermyth. Now, the problem with this idea is that it largely ignores what Greek mythology says about gods and how they came to be. According to the hypermyth, there are only 3 beings who have what has been called a spiritual origin, and these are Gaia, who's the original earth goddess, Uranus, who was the original sky god, and Pontos, who was the primordial sea god. Now, what spiritual origin means is that they are the remnants of a spiritual force that originated from the Big Bang that created the universe. So, according to Kurumada, the very original gods, Gaia, Pontos and Uranus, were created following the Big Bang, and they are the only three gods who were not human beings to begin with. However, Gaia, Uranus and Pontos have actually never appeared in the original series, and actually what the hypermyth says about the origin of the gods has never been stated or validated by the series itself. This is something that only appears in the hypermyth, but the information therein are never actually confirmed in the series itself. So you could consider it a little bit like a data book. It's official, it's canon, but it should be taken with a grain of salt until what it says is then confirmed inside the series. And in the actual series, the existence of the gods is simply accepted without question. We never see a single character questioning how come Athena really exists or where she comes from. Now, this is not to say that the nine sins has been forgotten. In fact, it has been mentioned relatively recently in the spin-off Saint Seiya Episode G Assassin. But here in the spin-off, the ninth sense is mostly a way for regular human beings to reach godhood, to transcend humanity. But it's not described as the sole reason why there are gods. For the most part, the more recent series have ignored what the hypermyth said about the origin of the gods, and instead they offered another version, which was far more faithful to the Greek myth. And it's a simple version, as I said, it's very faithful to the myths. And according to this idea, the primordial gods Gaia and Uranus gave birth to Kronos and the Titans. However, Uranus was a tyrant, and he ate his own children, all except the youngest, Kronos. And Kronos eventually grew up to slay his father and free his brothers and sisters. He then became the king of gods, but he also became a tyrant himself, and was eventually defeated by his own son Zeus in a massive war which is known as Titanomachia. And this is a pretty famous myth. Chances are you've heard of it somewhere. It's been mentioned everywhere from Disney's Hercules or the Percy Jackson's novels. But in the Saint Seiya canon, it was first mentioned in Saint Seiya Episode G, which is one of the older spin-offs from 2002. And in said spin-off, we eventually got to meet Kronos, the Titans, Pontos and Gaia. And in the spin-off, Kronos and the Titans have their own supreme form of cosmos, which is called the Dunamis. But it's never stated that they were once humans. And in fact, for the most part, they despise human beings. They never mention being or having ever been human beings themselves, and it's probably quite unlikely that they even were in this version of the story. So, what this means is that we have a dilemma, because the hypermyth version is probably what Masami Kurumada had in mind back when he created Saint Seiya in the 80s. But the 80s were a long time ago, and since this version has never been supported by anything taking place in the series itself, we don't really know how valid it still is. On the other hand, even Kurumada's own recent spin-off, Saint Seiya Next Dimension, seems to follow the Greek myth for the most part. For example, Next Dimension introduces Kronos as a bodiless entity sleeping in something which looks like a lake made of nebula and galaxies or something like that. It's all a bit trippy. And this lake is put on top of Mount Olympus. So it's probably safe to assume that while the nine senses are still a thing, deities are to be considered supernatural entities as in the Greek myth, at least for now, and at least until Kurumada himself in the actual series describes something different. Now, speaking about the individual deities, the main focus of Saint Seiya is on three of them: Athena, of course, Poseidon and Hades. But many more have been mentioned over the years. We've met some of them, others have just been foreshadowed over the decades. From Ares to Zeus, from the Titans, the Norse gods, the Egyptian gods, Pontus, and so on and so forth. Even including alien gods, and even actual aliens who crash-landed on Earth and became known as gods. True story. It did really happen in one of the spin-offs. So, as you can probably see by now, the idea is that there are at least several different types of gods and a pantheon of gods in the Saint Seiya universe. Kurumada himself usually sticks to the Greek gods, but the anime and the various spin-offs have introduced all sorts of other pantheons and types of deities. And next time, in the next video, we'll be talking about her main star, Athena, who in the series is the goddess of justice and the protector of humankind. So we'll analyze her in depth a little bit and talk about her. But this is it for now. This was just a short video. This has been the Dragon's Waterfall. Join the channel, subscribe, talk about knights with all your friends, and most of all, have a great Christmas. Take care. Bye.